Hello. Welcome, everyone. It's another Friday. Thank you so much for joining us here. I see Drew, I see Sean, I see Shannon, and I know there are other people trickling in, but LinkedIn never likes to show me all of the people in our audience. So, welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Friday when you could be doing a million other things, but you are here with us for an awesome conversation. And before I do get into it, folks, just wanted to go over some quick house rules. We do not ever discuss anything that is financial advice related here. This is a safe space. The opinions shared of me and the guest are of our own and do not necessarily represent our respective organizations. But anyone that is looking to join the conversation, if you have some questions after we kind of get going here and get this conversation going, feel free to jump in. This is a safe space and really looking forward to the conversation here. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Katherine to the program. Happy Friday, Katherine. How's it going?
It's going great. Before we kind of went live, we were talking about how it's been a busy week from the crypto regulatory perspective, but it's never a dull
Mm,
moment. So,
never a dull moment indeed in this space. And I think that's a huge part of what makes it interesting for
yes.
those that are so fortunate to work in the space. So let's give us the audience a little 30-second, maybe minute elevator pitch about who you are, currently where you are, and what you're up to.
Sure. So I was a homegrown law firm lawyer. I was a partner with King and Spalding, which is a giant global law firm in investigations and white collar defense. So representation of primarily TradFi market participants in U.S. government investigations, and also a lot of non-U.S. Entities in U.S. government investigations. And then I fell down the crypto rabbit hole and just couldn't get enough. So started writing on a bunch of crypto legal issues and then ultimately representing TradFi and acquisition due diligence into crypto and then crypto market participants in SEC investigations. And then decided to go totally degen as general counsel of Maple Finance, the DeFi protocol. Then, after the kind of traumatizing events of 2022 in DeFi and elsewhere in the industry, moved opportunistically to become chief legal officer of Cboe Digital, which is spot crypto exchange, futures exchange, and futures and derivatives clearing. So CFTC and state regulated, US only, very regulated crypto. So a completely different experience. And then very recently, so recently that I haven't yet even updated my LinkedIn, I'm general counsel of Starkware,
Well, look at
the
that.
layer
Yeah.
two blockchain infrastructure provider. So I've seen a lot of different types of crypto at this point.
Yes, you have indeed. So let's bring it back to the genesis when it all started for you. And this is funny because I recall this when we had our original conversation. You had mentioned that your crypto journey began with curiosity and listening to podcasts. So, how did that all start about, and how did you really kind of go from simply learning the language and lingo of crypto to becoming, a writer and a respective thought leader, etc.?
I think people find crypto super intimidating, and I find that frustrating because, especially when you compare it to TradFi, I'm like, if you understand derivatives or payment for order flow or some of the more sophisticated financial services concepts, you can understand DeFi and crypto. And part of it is really just learning the language. So I read a couple articles and said, this is fascinating, and had seen a lot of, frankly, the inefficiencies of TradFi firsthand, not just the amount of intermediaries, but just how things have ballooned in a very antiquated way,
Hmm.
sometimes in response to laws, like, frankly, anti-money laundering is a great example of that. So I was very excited about crypto and blockchain and tokenization and all of the aspects of that because I saw it as a way to modernize our financial services, mechanisms. And I was a big runner, still am, although now it's more of what I like to call wogging, like walking and jogging and some combo of the two. I started listening to just kind of a slew of different crypto podcasts on different topics that I found interesting while I would go on my runs. And much like a lot of people in this industry, the more I learned, the more I got excited about the ecosystem.
That's amazing. And one of the things as well too, is that we all kind of go down the rabbit hole respectively on our own journeys. You know, what were some of the other people maybe that were in your immediate circle? Did you tell them about your interest in crypto, or did you kind of more keep it on the down low and private?
Well, I was writing a lot of legal analysis and scholarship about crypto, but about, because especially this is true now, but especially, 5 years ago, if you Google a baseline legal concept, there will be 1,000 client alerts about that. But if you Google a very important issue and how that issue exists with blockchain technology or with tokens or something like that, there was very little scholarship. So I wasn't hiding my interest in the asset class. I definitely was in a law firm that wasn't that interested in growing the practice at that time. Now that has obviously changed. Law firms are more and more eager to grow their blockchain practice because, frankly, I saw it a little earlier than some lawyers, but the lawyers in the space have been saying for years there's going to be enormous growth in the demand for legal services with respect to crypto, particularly as it matures. I also had the benefit when I first went in-house in crypto. I kind of grew up with Marco Santori, meaning he was a friend from law school before crypto even was invented. Although I shouldn't say that because it ages both of us. So he and a few others were fantastic in kind of introducing me around. I met Rebecca Reddick very early on. Someone told Rebecca, hey, there's another like white shoe law firm partner that just went to be a DeFi GC. And so we immediately hit it off because she's like, are you insane? Like, this is awesome. But it was very telling even at that point. Half of my fellow partners at King & Spalding thought I was completely insane. They're like, you're leaving partnership to go be like a DeFi startup GC? Like, what are you thinking? The other half were like, this is incredible. Like, I'm so jealous. Like, this is a fantastic opportunity. So there's a very distinct split in the attitudes.
I bet. And, when you started creating that content and these, Law 360 pieces, how do you actually kind of make that transition into actual like sustainable billable work, and then more from kind of the due diligence from TradFi to really, representing market participants with SEC investigations?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I speak to a lot of young lawyers about this because at a law firm I grew up, I was summer associate, junior associate, senior associate partner, right? So that's the path many want to take, but it's very hard to get to partner. And then when you're a partner, it's hard to build a book, particularly in investigations. It's really difficult to say, hey, if you have your worst day ever, call me. And there aren't a lot of, like, it's not like you have a book of investigations work.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was hyper conscious about was building my own brand as a very young junior partner. I went straight through undergrad to law school. I made partner fairly early. So because of that, my network was more limited. I didn't have any type of government stint in between. So I was constantly thinking, how do I step outside the box and cultivate my brand as a mechanism to create business ultimately and bring value to my law firm. And one of the things I realized is I feel incredibly passionate about this ecosystem. The more I read and learned about crypto, the more excited I was about it. So it was very easy to kind of dive in because I loved it. And I think people in the ecosystem, even when I was outside counsel, could immediately get a sense of my enthusiasm and saw kind of a shared passion there, like that you really can't fake. But more so, I think it's really important as outside counsel to crypto for certain issues that you understand what we or your client does. You understand the underlying tech. That's not as important with different disciplines, but in order to refine your legal arguments and your advocacy and investigations, you actually need to understand how somebody trades with a DEX, for example, or how a smart contract works. So the more I learned, the easier it became for me to kind of pitch business, especially because at that time, there just weren't that many lawyers doing what I was doing.
Yeah, you definitely have to talk the talk and walk the walk here. And, one of the things that stood out from our original conversation is that you mentioned for anyone that is possibly curious about being a legal professional and looking to transition into the industry, you mentioned how essential it is to not only grasp the technology, but also to show genuine excitement for it. And, I mean, just into our conversation here, I can feel your passion. It's something that it's really hard to fake. So talk a little bit more about the importance of not only being passionate for what you do, but also, understanding the terminology and really keeping up to speed and really knowing what you're talking about going into even maybe a possible interview.
Yeah, I see Drew on the line, and I think him and I are very aligned on this point. But look, these days, even now, you have outside counsel where someone is the head of the blockchain group, but they've never actually traded crypto. I mean, they don't even have a Coinbase account.
And
And
before you go here, maybe there might be some folks in the audience that don't really know like too much about like the legal landscape. So can you just even break down like on a very basic level the difference between outhouse, in-house, and maybe some of the terms that you're using as well?
yes, absolutely. Now I'm speaking multiple languages because I'm speaking the language of crypto, but I'm also speaking the lawyer
Yes,
language.
yes, you are.
Yeah, so if you're in-house, that means you're working as a lawyer for a company. And general counsel or chief legal officer is usually the most senior lawyer at a company. And a lot of crypto startups, they might have one lawyer, they might have a team of 15, depends on the size and the legal issues. And so you're in-house or your GC. Outside counsel are the law firms that provide support on niche legal issues or legal issues where the in-house counsel doesn't have expertise on. So if you're a single GC, you're probably hiring outside counsel on issues like immigration or employment, kind of more niche issues where you just don't have the expertise to handle the issue. Companies in crypto also often hire outside counsel, law firms, private law firm lawyers on investigations. Like if you get a subpoena from the government, you're likely not going to handle it in-house. You're going to want to go to the law firms and the lawyers who they might be ex-government, or they have extensive expertise in dealing with those very specific strategic issues.
Love
So
it.
when I say outside counsel or law firms, I'm talking about you're a lawyer with a company and you're going to hire a law firm to handle a specific issue. Well, if you're a crypto company, you're going to want that lawyer at a law firm to understand your business and appreciate the value of crypto, frankly.
Now, how do you go about learning a lot of this stuff, in the first place? Everyone acquires knowledge in their own unique way. How do you go about it?
Yeah, people ask me that a lot. Like, I think people ask a lot of thought leaders in crypto, and especially because with my time at SIBO, I spent a lot of time talking to TradFi. And I spent a lot of time talking to TradFi crypto skeptics, my husband included. He's in TradFi. He's not the biggest fan of crypto. I'm still working on him. I'm wearing him down. It's actually a fantastic exercise to talk to people outside of the echo
It is,
chamber
yeah.
because it enables you to refine your own advocacy. But as I mentioned, I started with podcasts, but I then went in a bunch of different directions. I would watch YouTube videos on how to functionally follow the steps of, getting a wallet, for example. I also had crypto on a centralized exchange because I wanted to understand the mechanism, the gas fees. I wanted to experiment with a bunch of different wallets, and I find that there's a lot of resources even on baseline Google, like how to use MetaMask, how do you bridge to
Yeah,
Starknet, for example.
yeah.
And then finally, reading some of the basic white papers. For example, you want to learn more about Ethereum, going to the Ethereum Foundation's GitHub repository. They're really written in English, like they build on each other. So you get that baseline vocabulary. The sky's the limit in terms of your own understanding and expertise.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's funny because a lot of people do go on that path, but it's great to hear it from someone like yourself. So, what's some other advice that you may potentially give to people that are trying to balance this technical understanding with passion, and speaking to other founders and CEOs in this field?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing to understand is you don't need to have a tech background to understand all of the tech. I mean, I definitely don't have a technology background. I was kind of a classic lawyer. Like, I like reading and history. I did not like math. I still don't love math. Don't tell Starkware that. But I think if you're an intellectually curious person. And again, if you understand and appreciate the original ethos and the tenets of crypto, even if you don't necessarily agree that we can achieve all of those, and you can understand the use cases for crypto that go far beyond the obvious, then you're speaking the same language as founders, as a lot of the investors in the space. And what I often tell people that want to go in-house or want to work in crypto is, like, it is more important to know and love crypto than any of your other qualifications when you're looking for a job in crypto. When I got my first GC role, my background was very unusual for a GC. A traditional GC background is a corporate generalist. I did not have that skill set. But what Maple recognized is someone who knew and understood how Maple actually worked, and someone who really appreciated the potential of DeFi and institutional DeFi, and really understood and was ready to kind of defend and advocate for the technology and for the potential upside of this thesis.
Now, Katherine, let's go back to the initial interview that you had with Maple. And one of the things that stood out to me and was great was that one of the questions was to explain what Maple does. So tell me just a little bit about that experience and the lack of clarity or understanding that other candidates had, and how that impacted you being able to land where you got.
Yeah, it was great because it was a little surprising. Of course, I was learning everything I could about Maple before I interviewed. I listened to a bunch of podcasts where Sid, who's the CEO, he'd been on a slew of podcasts talking about what Maple did. I watched a few videos, that kind of detailed exactly how all of this works. So the first question that I got from Maple's recruiting team was, so tell me what Maple does. Like, tell me how you understand Maple's business. And so I was able to clearly articulate the flow and what Maple did. And later on, James, who was the recruiter, told me, I have to tell you, you gave by far and away the best answer. And I had interviewed a slew of people, and 90% of these highly qualified lawyers stumbled over that answer and really gave either an inaccurate answer or some sort of answer which clearly indicated that they hadn't done their homework, or they just didn't understand functionally the business on a high level. So that was extremely discouraging with their promise as a candidate.
And you had also mentioned that I believe that there was someone who was hired because they had a bigger like Twitter or Telegram following, not necessarily just because they were qualified for the role. So how important is it to, really be engaged and build a community and actually, bring value to the space wherever you are in your career?
There was someone like that at Maple, and there's also someone like that at Starkware. And I think it's fantastic. And both of these individuals were essentially incredibly, big fans of the tech. And they spent some time as students really diving into how Maple or how Starkware worked, and really had their own Twitter followers, like a pretty solid amount of followers, kind of tracing what these projects were doing, and touting the project's developments and interacting with the community. And both of those individuals, and this is probably a bit of a coincidence, but I think it's a great example of how this can bring value to a project, started as interns and ultimately basically built roles for themselves as effectively like ecosystem, marketing, Twitter people who were able to engage with the ecosystem, advocate for the projects, in an outward-facing manner, because they really lived and breathed this, and they lived and breathed this prior to even joining the company.
Yeah.
So talk about a sincere indication that they loved and fully understood what these projects were trying to do. Amazing.
So in this industry, specifically where legal precedents are often non-existent, how important do you think it is for lawyers to be able to rely on their network for innovation and even understanding different kind of legal arguments? Help us understand that a little bit, how that comes into play.
Absolutely essential. I think the thing that makes me a good GC is in part my network, meaning, I am in probably too many Telegram groups and other groups of crypto GCs. We talk all the time. I have many really good friends who are crypto GCs in different parts of the ecosystem. We are a very, very collaborative bunch. It's definitely a we're all in this together mentality. I've seen how TradFi works, and I can tell you it is not. This is not how the TradFi GCs work. The GC of Citi and the GC of JP Morgan are not always having drinks or Telegram.
I mean, help us
And
understand a little bit more about that, the differences between the traditional kind of space and your experiences so far here.
Well, I think there really is a sense that I don't necessarily want to be dramatic and say that we all get the sense that crypto is facing an existential risk, but we all understand and acknowledge that we're part of a nascent industry. And I don't want to see any crypto company, absent a crypto company that's engaged in fraud or criminal wrongdoing. That's different. I want those gone. But I don't want to see any other crypto company fail. I want to see crypto companies succeed because I think there's massive ability and potential for the broader crypto world to grow. And for the betterment of the industry, I like seeing smart projects that are doing interesting things thrive. So it's in my best interest. And even, this is true even in the case of a competitor. You can share discussion of legal concepts or interpretation or your take on this case or this precedent without sharing proprietary information. And frankly, there's also the added point of the fact that a lot of projects in crypto have radical transparency that doesn't exist in TradFi. So we're not hiding certain facets of financial information or strategy in a way that often TradFi entities will or have to.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the other interesting things that we had chatted about as well is how you've changed a bit over time from being maybe a more traditional risk-adverse lawyer to someone that's more of a proactive business partner. So can you talk a little bit about how you balance, being part of the business, particularly when it comes to working with product teams and, regulatory strategies and things like that, while still managing a reasonable legal risk?
Yeah, that is always the most difficult part about being a GC, frankly. And I really did consider myself a risk-averse lawyer, but I can't call myself risk-averse. You can't call yourself risk-averse if you're a crypto lawyer. But there is a shift, particularly shifting from outside counsel at a law firm to being in-house as general counsel. If you're outside counsel and you're a law firm lawyer, you go to your client and you can say, well, you can do this or this. I think you should do this, but maybe not. But ultimately, you're leaving the decision to your client. So the general counsel, in partnership with the business, is often making those tough decisions. And with crypto in particular, there is a spectrum of risk. It is not black and white what is permitted. And when you have those gray areas, you really have to balance risk. You have to balance the potential upside on a number of fronts, not just revenue, but other factors. And you have to ensure that the business is aware of the risk. It's not your job to eliminate the risk. That's impossible. And that's not a reasonable expectation for legal. It's your job to educate the business and help them make, appropriate decisions given that environment.
Now, how do you decide when it's appropriate to actually say yes and go out on a limb, even in a high stakes environment like this, where obviously regulatory uncertainty is a constant challenge?
I like saying yes. I don't like saying no. It's my least favorite thing to do, especially when the business or product has invested a lot of man hours and time. Having to say no, this is a no-go. I try to avoid that in all costs. So I think it's absolutely incredibly important as a GC when you join a project to make it clear, bring me in early. Bring me in early, bring me in often, bring me in at the ideation stage. So if this is a no-go, I can shut it down without wasting anyone's time. But more frequently, it's not me shutting it down. It's saying, well, it doesn't work like this, but let's brainstorm how we can ensure that we're doing this in a responsible manner, or how we're crafting our strategy accordingly, given the regulatory minefields. Let's be aware of the different kinds of risk within crypto and ensure we're thinking through all of these various areas. So, if you work as a business partner with the business, especially when they're in the brainstorming stage, it's a lot easier to ensure that they're aware of kind of where the lines are drawn.
And do you feel that maybe this is not just with you, but among other lawyers that you're having conversations with? Typically, people like to come and interact with lawyers when there's only a problem. Do you feel like that crypto companies or blockchain Web3 companies more specifically are being a little bit more proactive and looking at lawyers as being more of an ally than an adversary?
Yes and no. I think the thing, if I'm being 100% honest, one of the things I like about being a crypto lawyer is I think you're more important than other lawyers. uh,
Job security.
Look, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of smart crypto companies recognize the value of having good legal. And sometimes it's always a barrier being in-house or being a lawyer and understanding or ensuring that the business just doesn't see you as solely a cost center. You
Hmm.
are a cost center, but you're also adding value. You're adding value by ensuring that the business doesn't have to confront unnecessary litigation or investigations. You're helping with the overall credibility of the entity, particularly in crypto. That's important. Like for example, with strategic partners, and also, a lot of times, especially the GC, they really are seen as a senior business partner because the business can't go at it alone without your legal, because the business doesn't understand the regulatory issues in crypto because they're very difficult to understand even if you're a crypto lawyer. There's things happening literally 24/7 around the world that could or could not have an impact on your current strategy or your long-term strategy.
Yeah. Now, going back to the evolving regulatory landscape that is a continuing conversation, how do you see the momentum between maybe the SEC and other crypto organizations kind of playing out?
Yeah, that is a source of frustration, I think, for all people in legal and policy in crypto. I genuinely am a honey over vinegar person.
Hmm.
And that includes with regulators. And a lot of crypto lawyers are not like that. And obviously, there's also a spectrum of regulators. Look, like the OFAC's approach has been very different than the SEC's approach.
A little bit, yeah.
I hope we get to a point where there's more of an open dialogue in the United States with regulators and the industry. Now, part of that is shaking off the reputational issues that crypto has long, I will say, endured. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of entities and people in crypto that are here for the right reasons. They're law-abiding citizens. I don't want money launderers in crypto. Like, by all means, buy. Um, Unfortunately, there's still a bit of a perception in certain circles that there's a whole bunch of wrongdoers in this industry, and we're going to have to grapple with that. And that's something we always have to grapple with. There's always an additional level of scrutiny with regulators as soon as you say the word crypto.
Yeah.
But look, that can change quickly. That can change with different regulatory appointments, different attitudes, money. So I'm long-term optimistic. I wouldn't even say short-term pessimistic. I think we have to be patient. We're incredibly early with respect to innovation, and it just takes time for regulators and legislators to come around and recognize the potential in an industry like this.
Yeah, I think so too. And with the recent lawsuits and the pushbacks against this everything but Bitcoin as a security narrative, do you feel the space is gaining a more stable footing?
Um, Look, what I think we're seeing is, especially after 2022, one of the things that was most devastating to me is you had a whole bunch of entities in different industries. And I'm not even talking about TradFi. I'm talking about, for example, third parties engaging with NFTs. And they were excited and they were engaging. And then there were a lot of steps backward after 2022. And for a while, you saw a whole bunch of entities, particularly TradFi, kind of sitting on the sidelines, and they want to dip their toes in the water, but they're terrified given the regulatory environment and given FTX and the reactive nature of FTX. We're finally hitting a point where we are again seeing significant investment investment and engagement from tier one TradFi entities like BlackRock.
Hmm.
And look, Wall Street, there's definitely a bit of a lemming mentality. And if we get that long awaited crypto market structure legislation, I think that personally will be like opening the floodgates. There's a lot of different scenarios that I think, being a crypto lawyer, we're thinking through, not just legislation, but market structure legislation issues, science issues, the global environment. But I think we're making progress, and I think the performance of the ETFs definitely played a role in that.
And what are some other things that maybe from your legal mindset and perspective that average folks that may not be lawyers or in the legal field, what are some things that we should be paying attention to that maybe are on your radar?
So that's an interesting question. I think one of the things to pay attention to is the legislative environment. I mean, there's definitely, look, I hate that crypto has become even a tiny bit of a partisan issue. It shouldn't.
Mm,
It's about technology. The good news is finally we're encountering a situation, not to go into politics to any degree of depth, but both presidential candidates, at least crypto is part of the conversation.
yeah.
So if you're an average person, look at the degree of embrace you're seeing, or how is it part of the broader conversation? If you're stepping outside of crypto, those are the conversations that I actually find most important as an advocate. Crypto can be a real echo chamber. So you're going to see a whole bunch of people telling you to buy Bitcoin, buy ETH, sell it, but then buy it back, like within crypto. But I think that monitoring the broader environment, particularly the TradFi investment environment, the legislative environment, and the global embrace or lack thereof, is more important to understand the direction of the ecosystem.
Yeah. And this is maybe just a general question to kind of wrap it up here before we get to some more light and funny things. But, what was a misconception that you probably had, Catherine, prior to being a legal professional working in the industry before and after?
Yeah. So look, I don't want to say, uh, I'll say this. I was completely bowled over by the brilliance of the people in this industry after I joined. It's not like I didn't think people were going to be smart in crypto, but every single day I meet good people, people with strong morals and values. They want to do the right thing, that are scary smart. It was one of the things that drew me to Starkware. I find it incredibly invigorating to work with people that I think are smarter than me, like a lot smarter than me. To be in a position where you definitely know you're going to learn from someone that you can work alongside. And that's true, of course, in my company, but also on an ecosystem wide basis. My favorite thing to do is to sit down with other GCs at conferences and say, what are you thinking about?
Hmm.
What keeps you up at night, and kind of trade ideas. There's always something that I'm learning about. So what really exceeded my expectations was just the intellectual horsepower in this industry. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. So, changing gears here to things that might be a little bit more light, and we'll get to what you've been up to with all of your events and all of that fun stuff. But before we do that, I do want to open it up to the audience. So, people have been patiently waiting here. I don't know if anyone's going to be courageous here and brave on a Friday to come up and ask a question. But if there are any people in the audience that have a question, raise your hand, and we will do our best to get you up here. But in the meantime, I did just want to highlight all of the amazing things that you've been doing for the community. And I think that this is really important part of being a professional in this space, is just the continuous education, continuously networking. So can you bring us up to speed a little bit about some of the events that you've been going to recently, and maybe some of your favorite ones and what that's been like?
Sure. Well, I'd like to do more writing this year. It was really hard to do writing as when I was chief legal officer of SIBO Digital, because SIBO Digital was heavily regulated. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to engage in written thought leadership as the control person of a regulated entity. So I hope to do more writing. In the meantime, I've been kind of on the speaking circuit.
Yeah, you have. Yes, you have.
Um, so, This week I was at the Securities Enforcement Central Conference, which is a really interesting one because every panel throughout the day has someone from SEC Enforcement on it. So I was on the crypto panel, moderating the crypto panel with someone from SEC Enforcement. And I think it's amazing to talk to those people because you can't just hide from the SEC. Like, you need to be a face of legitimacy for the SEC. And I think that's something that we could all improve upon. Although I certainly don't blame projects that are in kind of stealth mode with the regulators. I recently spoke at a Cato Institute conference on privacy, a fantastic conversation about why our current system of anti-money laundering is totally antiquated. I'm speaking at the Fordham Blockchain Conference in October. That's a really great one. Like, if you really want to see kind of the best lawyers in this space communicate, that is a fantastic conference. So I like being part of the conversation. I think it's really important to put a face to the lawyers in crypto to say, I'm here. I could be working in TradFi. I could be a partner at a law firm, but I'm here, and I'm here for a reason because there's value here.
Yeah, I love that word that you just used, the value. It's all about value and bringing that every day, no matter what you do in any of your interactions. So we do have a couple of questions here. And Drew, I see that you're trying to raise your hand. Unfortunately, I'm not able to bring you up. LinkedIn is being a little bit weird for me right now, but I'll keep trying. So keep your hand raised and we'll get you up. But in the meantime, Drew's here. Welcome, Drew. So I don't know what order this necessarily went in, but Drew, because you're not on mute right now, how about you go first?
Cool. Thank you for hosting. Great way to spend a Friday.
Right on. What's your question?
The question, Katherine, always great to hear from you. So one thing you mentioned was that it's beneficial for lawyers in the space to understand and believe in the tech and its objectives and what it's trying to achieve, even if you think some of those things or the full extent of those objectives might not be feasible in all ways. What's your personal view on sort of tension between letting yourself, go through the exciting intellectual journey of all the potential possibilities, while also having to sort of tether back to reality in some ways to be a little more tactical in order to achieve sort of like singles and doubles instead of everything going for a home run in all cases?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think, especially GCs in this space, appreciate is pragmatic advice. And a lot of outside counsel will say, we'll talk about things on a very high level, or just say, like, the answer to everything is geo-block the US. Okay, great. I could have figured that out for myself. Thank you. Like, let's come up with creative solutions. And it's also important as a lawyer, I think, Drew, and you probably know this, is you can say, like, you can't have everything, but you can't say you can't have nothing. So finding a middle path between the two, it's difficult, but part of that is really creative thinking. And I also like talking to like founders and the business in a language they can understand. Like with Maple, I would occasionally say, okay, you have 1 million risk tokens. And if you want to do this, fine, but understand that it will cost 500,000 risk tokens. So understanding, like, in their language, the impacts of their decision making or what they want to achieve.
Cool. I like that. I like the risk tokens thing. I'm gonna use that.
We don't like to talk about tokens, but we'll talk about risk tokens.
Yeah, exactly. Geo-blocked risk tokens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Anything else, Drew?
No.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And next up, let's bring up Sean. Sean, welcome. Happy Friday. What's your question for us today? Oh, no, I think that Sean is dropped off somehow. So hopefully, Sean, if you're still there, raise your hand and we'll bring you back up. But we do have Javier. Actually, Sean, you're back. All right, Sean. Well, you're off mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. What's your question for us today?
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for hosting. This is super interesting. First time I've attended, but it's an interesting talk. And nice to meet you, Katherine. Actually, I've just at the end of August left Kaiko, but I interacted with James Giarratano, if I pronounce his name correctly.
I love it.
On a couple
Such
of
a small
conversations.
world.
Yeah. So nice to meet you. I've got a couple of questions, and there are kind of two sides of the question. One is the regulatory side, but the other is the commercial side in the US. So Kaiko got invited to the FSB meeting in Hong Kong in March, and I went along and I interacted with all of the regulators, but the US Treasury people there, and broadly speaking, they all hate crypto with a passion. It's really, kind of thought that there would be some opportunity to kind of go, hey, look, perhaps your thoughts are evolving, and it was clear that they really vociferously hate. All this is all of the bankers in the room. So like 80 central bankers in the room. Having this opinion. So that's one side. And I'd be interested in your opinion as to how, when, or if that changes. The other side is, in some general conversations, I was working in Hong Kong, I'm now based in the UK, but I'd heard this kind of paraphrase, which was, when you go and ask a law firm in the US, what should I do? They say, just leave the US. And I was told it's because as a law firm, these external counsels, law firm, they look at the landscape and they go, nothing's good's happening here, just leave. And we see in Singapore and Hong Kong a number of firms moving out, and the choice is BVI if you've got family ties in the US, or Singapore, Hong Kong, or Dubai if you're more younger, less family oriented. Is the anyway? So you see, so one side is the street, the other side is the regulators. What's your take on all that?
Well, I agree that regulators hate crypto. I mean, the other issue is, it's kind of like what I was saying before. When you talk about privacy, regulators think people, like, they associate privacy with wrongdoing. And look, I can't necessarily blame them for that, because historically people have sought and abused privacy. So you have to work harder with regulators to ensure that the original tenets of crypto are there for, like, the people there and the entities here are here for the right reasons, because there have been a whole host of crypto entities, or so-called entities masquerading as crypto entities, who have reaped a lot of, like, bad, frankly. So get the rug pulls, get the frauds, get the pig butchering schemes out of the conversation. And that's our starting point here. I think the other thing to keep in mind with this is again, it's like what I was saying, it's very young. The law is not well developed. The law is more developed in other jurisdictions outside of the United States. So you do have a dynamic where a lot of companies are leaving the US. A lot of GCs are jurisdiction shopping. I've had many a conversation about what jurisdiction is the best to form your next entity in, and it's never the US. And that's because we don't have a fully baked crypto law. Like, we don't have a law on stablecoins. We don't have a law on market structure. We don't have a law on DeFi, or lack thereof, or a strategic decision not to include DeFi. So part of it is just being patient in the US. I am not a believer that all of crypto is just going to up and leave the US. There's just too much money here, frankly. I think it's a matter of maybe people distance themselves from this very unclear regulatory environment for the time being, and then reevaluate when progress is made. And we are going to see progress sooner than later, because we have a dynamic where the Fair Shake super PAC is the single largest super PAC, which, for those who aren't familiar, that's the only mechanism you can use in the United States for basically providing unlimited funds to political candidates. But a crypto super PAC is the single largest super PAC out there, which is a shocking statistic, meaning a lot of people are investing heavily to accelerate the discussion of regulatory issues and legislation in the United States.
Can I ask you, I know it's hogging the question, can I kind of spin of that, which was someone else had the opinion that Gary Gensler, figuratively, as a kind of archetype of a broad set of people, he said they're not anti-crypto, they're anti-American crypto, and the design was like treating cancer. You kind of kill enough of the industry, but then support US-based crypto firms. I found that hard to kind of reconcile with what seemed to go on. What do you think about that? Like a strategic play.
I don't necessarily agree, because look, one of the beautiful parts of crypto is its global nature inherently. And your average crypto company is like the UN. You have people working all over the world. You have different jurisdictions in place. Most companies, they might have an entity they don't have multiple entities in one jurisdiction. They have an entity in 3 different jurisdictions. And even there are a lot of U.S. crypto companies. There's hundreds, if not thousands. So there's still a lot of activity here, and those crypto companies are more often than not, Cboe Digital being the exception because we were U.S. only, interacting with investors abroad and strategic partners abroad. So it's hard to bucket into U.S. crypto and non-U.S. crypto. Obviously, Chair Gensler has been a disappointment. When he was first appointed, there was a hope that he would be pro-crypto given his expertise as a MIT professor. That, I think, is a cautionary tale that you can never really tell how a regulator is going to regulate until they're in the seat.
Thank you. I have another question, but I shall give back to the floor and if there's time at the end, I'd like to ask another.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you. And next, that's been patiently waiting, is Javier. Javier, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I just had a quick question about your approach on Bitcoin Layer 2.
Yep. Oh, like my thoughts on it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm obviously biased on this question because I'm bullish on layer 2s generally. And it's really interesting what you're seeing now is like there's obviously a massive spectrum. Like we're seeing new layer 1s built to solve the problems that popped up that created the existence of layer 2s. But what makes me bullish on Bitcoin layer 2s is what makes me bullish on Ethereum layer 2s. And that's the advancements in technology. Like one of the things that makes me a huge fan of Starkware, for example, is not only the fact that the tech is superior and creates efficiencies in cost, scaling, et cetera, but also that very technology is incredibly promising on a number of other fronts. Like you look at the uses of ZK technology. And anything in my mind that can not only create scaling, but cost efficiencies in the process makes total sense. The issue with layer 2s, and this is true of Ethereum and Bitcoin, is you have to look at the various functionality. Like certain layer 2s, depending on the technology they're using, are more secure than others. So I think that's something that's been understated. A lot of the market participants that are interacting with layer 2s aren't as focused on security as I think they should be. So they need to be built correctly, but I am bullish on Bitcoin layer 2s for sure.
Love that. That's awesome. And one more question before we wrap it up here. I cannot believe how fast the time has flown, but that's always what happens here because we do have great conversations. Tom, welcome. What's your question for us today? And if you're here, Tom, you're on mute. We'll give Tom a little bit of time. Hopefully he gets off of mute and asks a great question. And if anyone else wants to have a question before we do get off here today, please raise your hand. But, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your current role and what made you interested in wanting to join Starkware and help us understand about all the great things that you're going to be doing there.
Yeah. So obviously I just mentioned I've always been bullish on layer 2s. I think blockchain infrastructure, that is so valuable. And again, because not only scaling, but the concept of what ZK tech can do for privacy, amazing. It really brings out the inner nerd. And those of you who are aware, Starkware's CEO, he was one of the original architects of Zcash. He was a former academic who taught at Princeton, Harvard, and MIT, which is slightly intimidating. But I looked at making a move opportunistically from Cboe because Cboe's strategy changed and was moving a little bit away from the kind of crypto that I wanted to do. And I had a few different opportunities, and they were like apples and oranges all within crypto. And I really went with my gut where I said, look, what makes me excited? And I was completely bowled over by the intellectual horsepower of the Starkware senior team. It's like I said earlier, it was really invigorating being able to sit beside these people who were just so brilliant and passionate about building something that was good for the ecosystem and community. This isn't a greedy group. It's a really principled group. They've built the best tech, indisputably. Now, there's always the question of if you build it, will they come? Not necessarily, but the tech was superior. I love the thesis and the ethos of Starkware. I had some really good conversations, and I felt like they were really ready to hire a senior team member and a partner.
Yes.
And that was very important to me. So it turned out to be a tough decision in many ways, but an easy decision in other ways.
I love that. Well, I'm glad that you found a new home and looking forward to all of the incredible things that continue to come out in the news because I've also do research and know some of the cool things they're working on. So kudos to you there for making that move. Want to end it up off here kind of more on a light note. Want to talk about some random facts. So are there any random facts or any like things that are funny that you want to share with our audience that typically people may never have known about you?
That's a really tough question. There are a bunch of random facts, some more interesting than others. I have itchy feet. I've traveled all around the world and have worked in a bunch of different international cities, including Istanbul, Zurich, Edinburgh, New York, Chicago. I also feel like everyone needs a creative outlet, and my creative outlet, in addition to fitness, as I mentioned, is actually baking elaborate cakes. Like I made my brother's wedding cake and my cousin's wedding cake, and I had coffee with a very prominent thought leader in crypto the other week in DC. I won't mention his name unless in case he doesn't want this communicated. But it was so funny. We both pulled out our phones and he was showing me the elaborate cakes he made in his spare time. And I was showing him my cakes. And I'm like, who knew that there was this weird subculture within crypto?
So are y'all like cake bosses?
We should really like start a Telegram group. If you bake and decorate interesting cakes in your ample free time, because there's so much free time with this regulatory environment, you can be invited to this my invite only crypto cake Telegram group.
That's amazing. You also had tea with someone that was very interesting. Do you want to mention who that is?
Oh yeah, this was very cool. So I was back in the day. I was an intern at the Scottish Parliament for 6 months, and my MSP, who I worked for, was the secretary. Well, he led the Young Conservatives for Scotland when he was in college, and his co-lead at the time turned out to be the Secretary of State for Scotland in the Thatcher administration. So he said, "Okay, you're coming with me after work on Friday." We picked up his wife. We drove out to this palatial Scottish estate, and it was him and his wife, the Secretary of State for Scotland, his wife, and we walk in and there's Margaret Thatcher. And she, motions to me and asks me if I want to sit on the settee next to her, which, settee is a tiny couch. So I'm sitting there next to Margaret Thatcher on a settee for 2.5 hours talking about the future of the Scottish Conservative Party. I think I was 21 years old, even before people had digital cameras. So I literally have like a physical photo of this. It was a pretty cool experience. No matter what you think of Lady Thatcher, like having tea with like a historical figure was pretty cool.
At 21, yeah, that's super cool. That's awesome. That's really nice. I love that.
She was really old even at that time. Like I'm not that old, but she was sharp as a tack and actually was really funny, was cracking jokes.
Look at that. Wow, that's awesome. Now I want to do a little segment called Bullish or Bearish. And I'm just going to throw out something random out there, and then you can tell me if you're bullish or bearish on it, and you don't have to give me any more context than just one or the other. So the first one, stablecoins, bullish or bearish?
Bullish.
Okay.
I love Circle. I think Heath Tarbert is brilliant. Their former GC Flavia is a friend. I think that company is very strategic.
I like that. Let's see here. I know that we've been talking about this, and maybe you've already expressed your feelings on it, but getting closer to regulatory clarity, bullish or bearish?
Getting closer, bullish. If you give me a time period, might be bearish, but getting closer, making progress.
We're heading in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Couple more here. Institutional adoption, bearish or bullish?
Bullish. Bullish.
Okay.
If you look at like one of my favorite moments last year was finally noticing out of the blue when Fidelity Canada changed its model portfolios to recommend a 3 to 5% allocation of crypto,
Huge.
which huge. And I don't think a lot of people notice that, but I was like, we are finally at the point where Fidelity in Canada, of all places, is telling the average person to hold 5% of crypto. It's amazing. And what does that mean? That means institutional adoption is coming.
Institutional adoption is coming, and I think this is kind of maybe related to that, but Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, bullish or bearish?
Oh, absolutely bullish. I mean, Cboe BZX was the listing venue for 6 of the spot Bitcoin ETFs and 5 out of 8 of the Ethereum ETFs. Obviously, the performance of those ETFs was nothing short of historic and a clear indication of pent-up demand. And so look, like we're going to see more and more derivative products off of digital assets. And that is good because it's a pathway towards institutional adoption and broader participation in the ecosystem.
Yes. And the last question for bearish and bullish is mainstream adoption, bearish or bullish?
Bullish in the long term, but we need to be patient. And it may take a full generational change before we see, the average person pulling out their crypto wallet to pay at the grocery store. And that's fine. We're early.
We are early indeed. Well, Tom, I believe that you're here. We might have time for one question, maybe if you keep it short, like 30 seconds, if you can hear us and are you off of mute, Tom? All right. I think Tom might be having some issues here, but this has been an amazing conversation. Time is up, and before we do wrap it up here, folks, wanted just to ask you, Katherine, how should people get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more about Starkware, if they're interested in just your journey, or maybe they might be a lawyer that's looking to join your amazing Telegram group that they don't have the invite to yet? How can people get in touch with you, and what's the best way to leave it here today?
You can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter, K Kirk Bos with one S at the end. And yeah, I will try my best to respond. I love speaking to people in the industry. And look, I love sharing my enthusiasm for crypto.
Yes. And what's up next? What are some things that we can look forward to that you may be up to in the near future?
So we have the big Fordham Blockchain Conference coming up in, I think, a week or two. And then you can look to hear more thought leadership from me, hopefully written, definitely speaking. The one conference I go to every year is I like to go to Consensus because I think there's a great amount of lawyers and really top talent on the policy and legal front.
Yeah.
So I go to Consensus and then I spend all of Consensus in meetings. But I think that's a good conference to go to if you really want to be strategic about setting up meetings and conversations with various stakeholders. It's massive, which is good and bad, but there's so many crypto conferences, it can be very overwhelming, and that's a good starting point, I think.
It is indeed. Consensus is a favorite of mine. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, Katherine. This has been an amazing conversation. We'll have some short clips up on LinkedIn soon from our chat here today, and then we'll be also uploading the full conversation on YouTube for those who were not fortunate enough to make it here live. And I want to thank everyone that showed up. We have Sean, Shannon, Robert, Melvin, Lucas, Zachary, Rennie, Michael, Albany, Musa, Trisha, and others. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time to join us today. Be safe, enjoy the weekend, and come back on Monday. We're going to be back for another amazing guest on Just Shilling. Have a great weekend,
Thank
y'all.
you so much, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.